Please, Uncle James, you can't just cut me out like this. It isn't fair.
Fairness has nothing to do with it. This is my decision, and it is final.
The surgical lights blazed overhead as Grace lay strapped to the operating table, her eyes wide with terror. Through the observation window, she could see Mrs. Chen's cold smile. The anesthesiologist approached with a syringe. "Please," Grace whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't understand what's happening." Dr. Morrison adjusted his mask, avoiding her desperate gaze. "Just count backwards from 10, he said mechanically. 10, 9. Grace's vision blurred with tears. 8. The door burst open. "Stop. Police." But Grace's world had already started spinning into darkness. Her last conscious thought a prayer that someone, anyone, would save her. 48 hours earlier. To enjoy this story, watch it from start to end. If all my fans make this video reach 20,000 views, I will give you December gift. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Click that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Comment below and tell us, would you take a job in a stranger's home? Let's discuss. The intercity bus rattled along the highway, carrying Grace further from everything she'd ever known. She pressed her face against the grimy window, watching the flat countryside of rural Manitoba give way to the sprawling suburbs of Toronto. Her entire life fit into the battered backpack on her lap. 3 changes of clothes, her mother's rosary, and a crumpled letter offering her a position as a personal care assistant. Grace Running Bear was 22 years old, though the hardships of reservation life had etched lines around her eyes that made her look older. Her long black hair, usually worn in a traditional braid, was pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore her only good outfit, a modest blue dress her mother had sewn from fabric bought at the trading post. "First time in the city?" asked the elderly woman sitting beside her. Grace nodded, not trusting her voice. The woman patted her hand knowingly. "My granddaughter went to Toronto 5 years ago," the woman said. "Scared out of her mind, just like you. Now she's a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital. You'll be fine, dear. Just remember who you are." The words gave Grace a small measure of comfort. She did know who she was, a daughter determined to save her family from crushing poverty. Her father's injury at the lumber mill had left him unable to work. Her mother cleaned houses in the nearby town, barely making enough to feed Grace's 3 younger siblings. This job, this chance, was their lifeline. The job posting had appeared on the community center bulletin board 3 weeks ago. Experienced personal care assistant needed for private client in Toronto. Room and board provided. Competitive salary. Medical experience preferred but not required. Grace had no medical training beyond basic first aid, but desperation had given her courage. She'd called the number, spoken to a crisp-voiced woman named Mrs. Chen, and somehow convinced her to take a chance on a hard-working girl with a good heart. As the bus pulled into the Toronto terminal, Grace's stomach churned with anxiety. The station was a chaos of noise, announcements echoing through speakers, hundreds of people rushing in every direction, the rumble of buses and taxis. She clutched her backpack and stepped off the bus into a world that felt impossibly large and fast. Grace Running Bear. A man in a black suit and driver's cap stood near the terminal entrance, holding a sign with her name. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "I'm Robert, the Chen family driver. Follow me, please." Robert led her to a sleek black Mercedes sedan parked in a no-parking zone. A security officer stood nearby but said nothing. Apparently, the Chen family had privileges ordinary people didn't. Grace slid into the back seat, sinking into leather so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. She'd never been in a car this nice. Back home, her family shared a 20-year-old pickup truck that needed a new muffler. As Robert navigated through downtown traffic, Grace stared out the window in awe. Buildings stretched toward the sky like glass and steel mountains. People in expensive suits rushed along crowded sidewalks, everyone seeming to have somewhere important to be. Digital billboards flashed advertisements for luxury watches, designer handbags, and tropical vacations, things Grace's family would never be able to afford. "First time in Toronto?" Robert asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Yes, sir. The Chan estate is in Rosedale. Very exclusive neighborhood. You'll find it quite different from... He paused, searching for a polite word. From wherever you're from. Pine Ridge Reserve, Grace said. Northern Manitoba. Robert nodded but said nothing more. 20 minutes later, they turned onto a tree-lined street where every house looked like it belonged in a magazine. Massive homes sat behind wrought-iron gates and manicured hedges. Robert pulled up to a gate with an intercom system and punched in a code. The gate swung open to reveal a 3-story mansion of red brick and white columns. A circular driveway curved around a fountain featuring marble dolphins. Grace had seen pictures of houses like this in movies, but she'd never imagined she would actually enter one. "Welcome to the Chan residence," Robert said, opening her door. Grace stepped out, her worn sneakers crunching on the pristine gravel. A woman emerged from the front door, tall, elegant, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Grace's family earned in 6 months. Her black hair was swept into an immaculate bun, and diamond studs glittered at her ears. "Grace, I presume," the woman said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm Eleanor Chen. Welcome." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Grace offered her hand, but Mrs. Chen barely touched it before pulling away. "Come inside. I'll show you to your quarters and explain your duties." Grace followed Mrs. Chen through a massive foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like frozen waterfalls of crystal. Everything gleamed, the polished wood, the gilt-framed mirrors, the fresh flowers in enormous vases. It was beautiful, but cold. Grace thought of her family's small house with its mismatched furniture and handmade quilts, and felt a sharp pang of homesickness. "You'll be responsible for my son, James," Mrs. Chen said as they climbed a curved staircase. "He's 28 and has been paralyzed from the waist down for 18 months following a skiing accident in Aspen." Mrs. Chen led Grace down a hallway lined with family portraits, generations of Chens staring down from ornate frames. Grace noticed that in every photo, they looked powerful and slightly intimidating. "James was studying for his MBA at Harvard when the accident happened," Mrs. Chen continued, her voice carefully neutral. "He was an avid skier. Black diamond runs, backcountry adventures. He was always so active." There was deep sadness in those words, Grace realized. Whatever else Mrs. Chen might be, she was a mother grieving the life her son had lost. They stopped at a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Mrs. Chen knocked softly. "James, the new care assistant is here." Silence. Mrs. Chen sighed and opened the door anyway. The room beyond was enormous, bigger than Grace's entire house back home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a sprawling garden. Expensive workout equipment sat unused in one corner. A massive bed dominated one side of the room, and near the windows sat a young man in a state-of-the-art wheelchair. He didn't turn around when they entered. "James, this is Grace Running Bear. She'll be assisting with your daily needs." Grace studied the back of his head. Dark hair, slightly too long. Broad shoulders beneath an expensive sweater. His hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair with white-knuckled intensity as he stared out at the garden. "James," Mrs. Chen began. "I heard you the first time," he said, his voice flat. "Another one to add to the collection. How long will this one last? 3 weeks? 4? Mrs. Chen's jaw tightened. "Grace comes highly recommended." "They all do." James finally turned his wheelchair around. Grace's breath caught. He was handsome, striking, even, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes. But those eyes were filled with such profound bitterness that it almost hurt to look at them. This wasn't just a man dealing with disability. This was someone who'd given up on life entirely. "Hello," Grace said simply. James looked her up and down with an expression of complete disinterest. "You're young. Most of the previous assistants were older. My mother must be getting desperate." He turned back to the window. "Your room is next door. Mother will explain the schedule. Try not to be too chatty. I prefer silence." Mrs. Chen touched Grace's elbow, guiding her back into the hallway. Once the door closed, she spoke in a low voice. I apologize for James's behavior. He wasn't always like this. Since the accident, he's pushed everyone away. Friends, his fiancée, even family. You're his 7th personal care assistant in 18 months. What happened to the others? Grace asked. He made their lives so difficult they quit. He's cruel when he wants to be, especially with his words. Mrs. Chen met Grace's eyes directly. I won't sugarcoat this. This job will test your patience. But if you can reach him, if you can help him find even a small piece of who he used to be, the compensation will be worth it. I'm offering $50,000 per year, plus full room and board. Grace's mind reeled. $50,000. Her entire family survived on less than $20,000. This was life-changing money. I'll stay, Grace said firmly. Mrs. Chen showed her to a smaller but still luxurious bedroom adjacent to James's room. There's a connecting door, but keep it locked on your side unless you hear him calling for help. Your duties include helping him with morning routines, bathing, dressing, physical therapy exercises. You'll prepare his meals according to the nutritionist's guidelines. He takes several medications throughout the day. The schedule is all written out. She handed Grace a thick binder. Emergency numbers are in the front. James has good days and terrible days. On terrible days, he's been known to throw things. I suggest you develop a thick skin. After Mrs. Chen left, Grace sat on the edge of the bed and called home using the phone Mrs. Chen had said she could use for family calls. Grace. Her mother's voice was thick with relief. We were so worried. Did you arrive safely? I'm here, Mom. The house it's incredible. Like a palace. And the family. Are they treating you well? Grace thought of James's cold dismissal, Mrs. Chen's calculating eyes. They're fine. The pay is good. Really good. I'll be able to send money home by the end of the month. Her mother's voice cracked. Your father will be so relieved. The bank was threatening to foreclose on the house. Grace, you're saving us. After hanging up, Grace unpacked her few belongings. She placed her mother's rosary on the nightstand and changed into the plain scrubs Mrs. Chen had provided. Tomorrow, her real work would begin. That night, she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city. Distant sirens, the hum of traffic, the strange echo of her own breathing in a room too large and too quiet. Through the wall, she heard movement from James's room. Then, faintly, she heard something that made her chest ache, the muffled sound of someone crying. The bitter, angry man in the wheelchair was broken in ways that went far deeper than his paralyzed legs. Grace's alarm went off at 6 a.m. She dressed quickly in her scrubs and pulled her hair into a neat bun. According to the binder Mrs. Chan had given her, James's morning routine began at 7 sharp. At 6:45, she knocked on the connecting door between their rooms. No answer. She knocked again, louder. James. It's Grace. I'm here to help you get ready for the day. Go away. His voice was muffled, thick with sleep. Grace took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was dark, curtains still drawn. James was in bed, the covers pulled up to his chin. His wheelchair sat empty beside the bed. I said go away, he repeated, not looking at her. The schedule says. I don't care what the schedule says. Get out. Grace hesitated. Every instinct told her to leave, to avoid confrontation. But she thought of her family, of the desperate situation back home. She couldn't fail on day one. Mr. Chen, I'm here to do my job. If you'd prefer to remain in bed, that's fine, but I need to check your vitals and make sure you're comfortable. Mr. Chen, he mimicked mockingly. How formal. Just call me James. Or better yet, don't call me anything. Pretend I don't exist, the way everyone else does. Grace moved to the windows and pulled the curtains open. Sunlight flooded the room. James threw an arm over his eyes with a groan of protest. What are you doing? It's morning, Grace said simply. She checked his medication chart. You're supposed to take these with breakfast. What would you like to eat? Nothing. I'm not hungry. The nutritionist's plan says. The nutritionist can go to hell, and you can join her. James finally looked at her, his eyes hard. Here's how this works. You're going to realize, probably within the week, that I'm not worth the trouble. You'll quit, just like the others. So why don't we skip the pretense? Pack your bags now and save us both the time. Grace met his gaze steadily. No. That single word seemed to surprise him. He blinked. No. I'm not quitting. I made a commitment, and I keep my commitments. How noble, he said sarcastically. Let me guess, you need the money. You've got some sob story about a sick relative or crushing debt. They all do. My father was injured. My family is about to lose our home. Yes, I need the money. Grace's voice remained calm. But that doesn't mean I don't take this job seriously. I'm here to help you, whether you want help or not. James stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was naive or stubborn. Finally, he sighed. Fine. If you're going to stay, here are the rules. You don't ask me personal questions. You don't try to be my friend. You do your job quietly and efficiently, and then you leave me alone. Understood. Understood. Good. Now get out. I'll call you when I'm ready to transfer to the chair. Grace left the room but kept the connecting door slightly ajar. 20 minutes later, she heard a crash and a string of curses. She rushed back in to find James on the floor beside his bed, having tried and failed to transfer himself to his wheelchair. Don't, he warned as she approached. Don't you dare feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you, Grace said honestly. I'm just going to help you up. She'd assisted her father after his injury, so she knew the basics of safe transfers. She positioned the wheelchair, locked its brakes, and helped James shift his weight. He was heavier than her father, all upper body strength, but she managed. Within minutes, he was settled in his chair, breathing hard from the exertion and frustration. Thank you, he muttered, the words clearly painful for him. You're welcome. Now, what would you like for breakfast? The first week followed a similar pattern. James refused to make anything easy. He rejected every meal Grace prepared, claiming it tasted like cardboard. He forgot to take his medications until Grace insisted. During physical therapy sessions with the therapist who visited 3 times a week, he put in minimal effort, earning disappointed looks from the therapist and cold silence from Mrs. Chen. But Grace noticed things. She noticed that on the days when James was particularly cruel, he wouldn't meet her eyes afterward, as if ashamed. She noticed that he kept a leather-bound journal in his nightstand drawer but never wrote in it when anyone was around. She noticed that late at night, when he thought everyone was asleep, he'd wheel himself to the window and stare out at the garden for hours. He was a prisoner in his own body, and the luxurious room had become his cell. On Friday evening, Grace brought his dinner: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and brown rice, exactly as prescribed by the nutritionist. James took one look at the plate and pushed it away. I'm not eating this garbage. Then you'll be hungry, Grace said mildly. She'd learned not to argue. Don't you ever get angry? James demanded suddenly. Don't you want to tell me what an ungrateful bastard I'm being? Would it help if I did? He laughed bitterly. Probably not. Nothing helps. He wheeled himself to the window. You know what the worst part is? Everyone thinks I'm brave. Oh, James is so strong, dealing with his disability so well. If they only knew. The weekend brought a new challenge. Visitors. On Saturday afternoon, a sleek red convertible pulled up the circular driveway. Grace, who was helping James with his physical therapy exercises in the sunroom, saw him tense immediately. Who is it? She asked. My former fiancé, James said flatly. Right on schedule. Vanessa visits once a month to ease her guilty conscience. A stunning blonde woman emerged from the car, wearing designer sunglasses and a dress that probably cost more than Grace's entire wardrobe. She checked her phone before walking to the door, her heels clicking on the stone pathway. Minutes later, Mrs. Chen led Vanessa into the sunroom. "James, darling. You look wonderful." James's expression was carefully blank. "Vanessa." Vanessa leaned down to kiss his cheek, but her attention was already wandering around the room. Her gaze landed on Grace with barely concealed curiosity. "And who's this?" "My current care assistant. Grace, this is Vanessa Caldwell." "Nice to meet you," Grace said politely. Vanessa barely acknowledged her before turning back to James. "I can't stay long, brunch with the girls at Canoe, but I wanted to check in. Mother is organizing her annual charity gala next month. Everyone's asking about you." "Tell everyone I'm thriving," James said dryly. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. You know what I mean. People care about you. Do they?" James's voice had an edge now. "Or do they just want the gossip?" "Did you hear about James Chen? So tragic. Remember when he used to ski? Remember when he was normal?" Vanessa's smile faltered. "That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time any of my so-called friends actually visited? When's the last time you visited without it being part of your social obligation calendar?" "James. It's been nice seeing you, Vanessa. Don't let me keep you from your brunch." Vanessa's eyes glistened with tears, though Grace suspected they were more from frustration than genuine hurt. "You're impossible," she said. "I'm trying, James. I'm trying to be here for you." "Then why are you wearing your engagement ring?" "Oh, wait, that's not mine, is it? That's from Trevor Langston. I heard you got engaged 3 months ago. Congratulations." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "How did you?" "People talk. They assume I'm paralyzed from the neck up too, that I don't hear things." James's voice was calm, but Grace could see his hands trembling on the wheelchair armrests. "It's fine, Vanessa. I don't blame you for moving on. You shouldn't have to spend your life with half a man." "Don't say that," Vanessa whispered. "Why not? It's true. I'm defective. Broken. You made the right choice." Vanessa turned and fled, her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Moments later, they heard the front door slam and the convertible's engine roar to life. The sunroom fell silent. James sat very still, staring at nothing. Grace quietly resumed the physical therapy exercises, moving his legs through the prescribed range of motion. "You don't have to say anything," James said finally. "No inspirational speeches about how I'm not broken or how I'll find love again." "I wasn't going to," Grace replied. "I was going to say that she shouldn't have worn the new engagement ring to visit you. That was thoughtless." James looked at her in surprise, then let out a short, genuine laugh. "You're right. That was extraordinarily thoughtless." He paused. "The really pathetic part? I don't even miss her. I miss who I was when I was with her. I miss the person who could plan a future." Grace continued the exercises in silence. When they finished, James didn't immediately wheel himself away, as he usually did. "Grace," he said quietly, "thank you for not pitying me." "You're welcome." That evening, for the first time, James ate the entire dinner Grace prepared. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The following week, something shifted. James stopped being actively cruel and became merely distant. He took his medications without argument. He put genuine effort into physical therapy. He even said, "please" and "thank you," though the words seemed rusty from disuse. On Wednesday, Grace was cleaning James's room while he worked on his laptop. He'd started taking online business courses to keep his mind sharp. She accidentally knocked over a framed photograph on his dresser. "Sorry," she said, picking it up. The photo showed a younger James at the summit of a snow-covered mountain, grinning widely, his arms raised in triumph. He looked so alive, so full of joy. "That was empty Kilimanjaro," James said, noticing what she was looking at. 3 years ago. I climbed it with my college roommate. It looks amazing. It was. His voice was wistful. I was always chasing the next adventure. Rock climbing in Patagonia, surfing in Bali, skiing in the Alps. I thought I was invincible. He gave a bitter smile. Turns out I wasn't. Grace set the photo back carefully. My grandmother used to say that the Creator never gives us more than we can carry, even when the load feels impossible. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. She passed away when I was 15. Grace hesitated, then added, she also said that sometimes we carry loads that aren't meant for us, that we take on burdens that belong to others. James looked at her sharply. What do you mean? I think you're carrying guilt that isn't yours. The accident wasn't your fault. It wasn't a punishment for being adventurous or confident. It was just something that happened. How do you know it wasn't my fault? James's voice was tight. You don't know what happened on that mountain. Grace met his gaze. You're right. I don't. But I see how you punish yourself every day. And I wonder if you're doing it because you feel guilty for surviving, or because you feel guilty for being angry about what you lost. James opened his mouth, then closed it. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Finally he said, You're very perceptive for someone so young. How old are you? 22. I thought you were older. You seem. He searched for the word. Weathered. The next day, Grace arrived for James's morning routine to find him already awake and dressed, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. You're up early, she said, surprised. Couldn't sleep. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down. I want to ask you something. Grace sat cautiously. James studied her face for a moment before speaking. Yesterday, you mentioned your grandmother. Tell me about your family. What's life like on the reserve? It was the first personal question he'd ever asked her. Grace found herself describing her childhood, the small house she'd grown up in, her father's work at the lumber mill, her mother's tireless efforts to keep the family fed and clothed. She told him about her siblings, 12-year-old Sarah who wanted to be a veterinarian, 10-year-old Marcus who was gifted at drawing, and 8-year-old Tommy who collected rocks and dreamed of becoming a geologist. They all have big dreams, Grace said. But without money for education. Those dreams stay dreams, James finished. Is that why you took this job? To give them opportunities? Partly. And to save our house. The bank wants to foreclose. My father's medical bills. She trailed off, realizing she was sharing too much. But James didn't look bored or dismissive. He looked genuinely interested. What happened to your father? A logging accident. A tree fell wrong, crushed his leg. He survived, but he can't work anymore. The mill gave him a small settlement, but it wasn't enough. James was quiet for a moment. My accident happened on a black diamond run in Colorado. I'd skied that run a dozen times before. But that day, there was hidden ice under fresh powder. I lost control, hit a tree at full speed. Shattered my spine. He took a sip of coffee. The doctors said I was lucky to survive. For a long time, I wished I hadn't. And now? Grace asked softly. Now? I don't know. Most days I'm still angry. But some days like today, I think maybe there's a reason I'm still here. It was a breakthrough moment, fragile and precious. Grace didn't push, didn't try to force deeper revelations. She simply sat with him in comfortable silence, watching the morning sun paint the garden gold. That afternoon, James's older sister Jennifer stopped by. Grace had heard about Jennifer but never met her. She was a human rights lawyer who spent most of her time traveling for work. James. Jennifer swept into the sunroom like a force of nature. Finally, I'm back in Toronto long enough to visit properly. She hugged him fiercely, then turned to Grace. And you must be the miracle worker Mom's been telling me about. Grace, "This is my sister Jennifer," James said, and there was warmth in his voice that Grace had never heard before. "Miracle worker?" Grace repeated uncertainly. "Mom says you're the first care assistant who's lasted more than a month," Jennifer said, grinning. "And that James has actually been participating in physical therapy. That's a miracle in my book." "I'm right here," James protested. "You can stop talking about me like I'm not in the room." "Oh, hush. You know I love you." Jennifer pulled up a chair. "So, Grace, how are you liking Toronto?" They talked for over an hour. Jennifer asked thoughtful questions about Grace's family and life on the reserve, and actually listened to the answers. She shared stories about James before the accident. His competitive nature, his terrible cooking, his tendency to throw himself fully into whatever interested him. "He once decided to learn Mandarin," Jennifer said, laughing. "Spent 6 months studying 8 hours a day. By the end, he was nearly fluent. That's just how he is. When he commits to something, he goes all in." James rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his small smile. Grace realized this was the first time she'd seen him genuinely happy around family. When Jennifer left, she hugged Grace at the door. "Thank you," she whispered, "for whatever you're doing. He's more like himself than he's been in over a year." That evening, as Grace helped James with his nighttime routine, he said, "Jennifer likes you. She's an excellent judge of character. She's wonderful. You're lucky to have her." "I am." He paused. "Grace, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I was difficult." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," Grace said with a slight smile. James laughed. "Fine. I was an absolute nightmare. I wanted you to quit because everyone quitting confirmed what I believed, that I wasn't worth the effort. But you stayed. Even when I gave you every reason to leave." "You're worth the effort," Grace said simply. "Why? Why do you think that?" "Because everyone is worth the effort. Everyone deserves compassion, even when they're hurting and pushing people away. Especially then." James looked at her intently, something shifting in his expression. "Who taught you to be like this?" "My grandmother. My mother. My community. We don't abandon each other, no matter how difficult things get." Grace finished organizing his medications for the next day. "Good night, James." "Grace, would you tell me more about the reserve sometime? About your traditions, your people's history? I realize I know almost nothing about indigenous culture." "I'd like that," Grace said, meaning it. As she returned to her room, Grace felt a lightness in her chest. James wasn't just healing physically, he was beginning to let himself hope again. And somehow, impossibly, they were becoming friends. The following weeks brought a new routine. Each evening, after dinner, James and Grace would sit in the sunroom and talk. Grace told him stories about her community, the powwows, the traditional ceremonies, the way everyone supported each other through hardship. James shared his own stories, business school adventures, travel mishaps, his complicated relationship with his parents' expectations. "My father built Chen Industries from nothing," James explained one evening. "He's a brilliant businessman but a terrible communicator. Everything is about the company, about building wealth and influence. When I had the accident, I think his first thought was about succession planning." "That seems cold," Grace ventured. "It's just who he is. He shows love through providing. This house, the medical care, hiring you, that's his way of showing he cares." James shrugged. "I've made peace with it mostly." One afternoon, while James was working on his laptop, Grace cleaned the bookshelves in his room. She pulled out a photo album that had been stuffed behind some business textbooks. "You can look at it," James said without turning around. Grace opened the album. It was a chronicle of adventures. James scuba diving with sharks, hang gliding over Swiss valleys, running marathons. In every photo, he was smiling, vital, fully alive. "I was stupid," James said quietly. "I thought I was immortal. I took risks because consequences felt theoretical." You weren't stupid. You were young and brave. Brave. James turned his wheelchair to face her. Is it still bravery when you're being reckless? When you're running from something instead of toward something? What were you running from? James hesitated, then said, expectations. Everyone assumed I'd join my father's company, marry someone from the right family, live the prescribed life. The adventures were my way of pretending I was free. And now I have no expectations to run from. Everyone's expectations have been lowered so much that anything I do is considered an achievement. His voice was bitter again. Grace closed the album. James, what do you want? Not what your family wants, not what society expects. What would make you happy? I don't know, he admitted. I've been so angry for so long, I've forgotten what happiness feels like. That evening, Mrs. Chen called Grace into her private study. Grace had barely spoken to Mrs. Chen beyond basic updates about James's care. The study was elegant and intimidating, with dark wood paneling and leather furniture. Please sit, Mrs. Chen said, gesturing to a chair. I wanted to thank you personally. James has shown remarkable improvement. The physical therapist says he's working harder than ever. Even Dr. Morrison is pleased. James is doing the work, Grace said. I'm just supporting him. Mrs. Chen studied her carefully. You're very modest. My husband and I appreciate your dedication. She paused. There's something I need to discuss with you. James mentioned that he's been sharing personal information with you. Stories about his life, his feelings about the accident. We talk sometimes, Grace said cautiously. Good. That's good. We want him to feel comfortable with you. Mrs. Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm scheduling a comprehensive medical evaluation for you next week. Just a routine checkup. We provide full health insurance for all staff members. It's part of your benefits package. That's very generous, but I feel fine. I insist. It's company policy. Mrs. Chen's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The appointment is Tuesday at 10 a.m. Robert will drive you to the clinic. Grace left the study feeling uneasy. Something about Mrs. Chen's demeanor had been off. Too controlled, too calculated. That night, she heard raised voices from downstairs. Unable to sleep, she crept to the top of the stairs and listened. She's perfect, Mrs. Chen was saying. Young, healthy, almost certainly a match given her genetic background. Eleanor, we can't just. That was Mr. Chen's voice. We're running out of time. Dr. Morrison said James needs a transplant within 6 months or he'll face complete kidney failure. The waiting list is years long. There are other options. What options? Hope some stranger dies so our son can have their kidney? This way we control the outcome. Grace's blood ran cold. Transplant? Kidney. They couldn't possibly mean. We'll need to confirm compatibility first, Mrs. Chen continued. That's what the routine checkup is for. If she's a match, we proceed with the plan. And if she refuses, she won't have a choice. Once we're abroad, once it's done, she'll have no recourse. We'll compensate her family generously afterward. They'll be too grateful to cause trouble. Grace clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They were planning to take her kidney. By force. The realization was so monstrous, so unthinkable, that for a moment she couldn't process it. She stumbled back to her room on shaking legs, her mind racing. She had to leave. Immediately. But where would she go? She had barely any money. The city was huge and unfamiliar. And James didn't know. She was certain of that. This was his parents' plan, their desperate, criminal attempt to save their son. But if she disappeared, what would they do? Would they hurt her family to keep them quiet? Grace spent the night staring at the ceiling, terrified and trapped. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would go to the checkup, pretend everything was normal, and buy herself time to figure out an escape plan. The medical clinic was sleek and modern, nothing like the community health center back home. Dr. Morrison, a cold-eyed man in his 50s, greeted Grace with professional detachment. "Miss Running Bear, this is just a standard physical. Nothing to worry about." But Grace noticed how thorough the blood tests were. Multiple vials drawn. Questions about her family medical history, focusing specifically on kidney function, diabetes, hypertension. When the nurse asked about her relationship with the Chen family, Grace's suspicions solidified into certainty. "We're very close," Mrs. Chen interjected smoothly. "Grace is like family to us." The words made Grace's skin crawl. Back at the mansion, she found James in the sunroom, looking frustrated. "Where were you? I called for you this morning. Your mother took me for a checkup. Standard staff medical exam." "That's odd. She never mentioned it to me." James frowned. "Are you okay? You look pale." "Just tired." Grace forced a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Actually, not great. Dr. Morrison is concerned about my kidney function. Apparently the paralysis has led to complications. They might need to do more aggressive treatment." James's voice was tight with worry. "There's talk of dialysis if things don't improve." Grace's heart sank. James had no idea his mother was planning to give him her kidney by stealing it. That evening, Sarah, James's younger sister, arrived for dinner. She was 18, home from her first semester at McGill University. Unlike Jennifer, Sarah was quiet and observant, watching everything with intelligent eyes. During dinner, Sarah kept glancing between Grace and her parents, a puzzled expression on her face. After the meal, she found Grace in the kitchen. "Can we talk?" Sarah asked quietly. "Privately." They went out to the garden, away from the house. Sarah looked nervous. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has my mother said anything strange to you? About James's treatment?" Grace's pulse quickened. "Why do you ask?" "Because I overheard my parents talking last night. They said something about the plan, and making sure the girl doesn't suspect anything." "Grace, I think they're planning something involving you. Something bad." The fear that Grace had been suppressing broke through. "They're going to take my kidney," she whispered. "They want to give it to James without asking me. They're going to take me abroad, do the surgery, and then—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's face went white. "Oh my God. Oh my God, I thought I was imagining things." She grabbed Grace's arm. "You have to leave. Tonight. I'll help you. They'll hurt my family. We need evidence first. Something concrete that will protect you and your family." Sarah thought for a moment. "My father's study. He keeps everything documented. If there's a plan, there will be papers, emails, something. I can get you in there tonight while everyone's asleep." At 2 a.m., Sarah crept to Grace's room. Together, they snuck downstairs to Mr. Chen's study. Sarah used her father's birthday as the computer password. It worked. Within minutes, they found everything. Emails to Dr. Morrison about surgical timing. Transfer records showing they'd moved significant funds to a foreign account. Most damning of all, a detailed itinerary for a family trip to Singapore, with Grace listed on the private jet manifest and a reservation at a private surgical facility. "They're doing this next week," Grace breathed, reading the dates. "They were going to tell me tomorrow about the family vacation." Sarah took photos of everything with her phone. "This is enough. We go to the police." "What about James? Does he know?" "No. He can't. My parents wouldn't risk him refusing." Sarah looked anguished. "He's going to be devastated when he finds out what they planned." Grace thought of James, his slow healing, his gradual return to hope. This would destroy him. "We have to tell him," Grace said firmly. "Before we go to the police. He deserves to know the truth from us, not from investigators." They found James still awake in his room, reading. He looked up in surprise when they entered together. Sarah. Grace. What's wrong? Sarah's voice shook as she spoke. James, Mom and Dad. They've been planning something. Something terrible. As Sarah explained, showing him the evidence on her phone, Grace watched James's expression transform. Confusion became disbelief, disbelief became horror, and horror became a rage so profound it seemed to consume him. They were going to steal your kidney? He turned to Grace, his face ashen. They were going to hurt you to save me? They're desperate, Grace said quietly. They love you. That's not love. James's voice cracked. I don't even have words for what that is. He looked at the evidence again, his hands trembling. We have to stop them. We go to the police. Right now. There's something else, Sarah said hesitantly. I found a secondary plan. If Grace refused to cooperate even after the surgery, Dad has contacts. People who could make problems disappear. The implication hung in the air. They weren't just planning to take Grace's kidney. They were planning to ensure she could never tell anyone about it. James looked like he might be sick. Get out, he said hoarsely. James. Grace began. Not you. Them. My parents. I want them gone. Sarah, call the police. Now. Grace, pack your things. You're not staying in this house another minute. Within an hour, 2 police officers arrived at the mansion. Detective Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, took charge immediately. She reviewed the evidence Sarah had gathered while her partner, Officer Thompson, secured the scene. Mr. and Mrs. Chen were roused from bed. Mrs. Chen appeared in a silk robe, her usual composure shattered when she saw the police. What is the meaning of this? Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Detective Martinez said, we have evidence that you've been planning to conduct an illegal organ transplant. You're both under arrest. This is absurd. Mr. Chen blustered. Do you know who I am? Yes, sir. You're someone who is planning to kidnap and perform surgery on an unwilling victim. That's attempted kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy to commit organ trafficking. Mrs. Chen's eyes found Grace across the room. The hatred in that gaze made Grace step back. You ungrateful little. Don't, James said, his voice cutting through the chaos. He wheeled himself between his mother and Grace. Don't you dare blame her for your crimes. James, you don't understand, Mrs. Chen said, her voice breaking. You're dying. Your kidneys are failing. We were running out of time. So you were going to murder someone? To save me. James's voice was filled with disgust. Did you really think I could live with that? Knowing someone died so I could survive. She wouldn't have died, Mrs. Chen insisted. Just lost one kidney. People live perfectly normal lives with one kidney. You had it all planned out, didn't you? Sarah said bitterly. Take her kidney, compensate the family, maybe arrange an accident, if she caused trouble. Mrs. Chen's silence was damning. The police led Mr. and Mrs. Chen away in handcuffs. As the front door closed behind them, the mansion fell into stunned silence. James sat motionless in his wheelchair, staring at nothing. James. Grace ventured softly. I need to be alone, he said, his voice hollow. Over the next few days, the story exploded into the media. Toronto business magnate arrested in organ trafficking plot, screamed the headlines. The Chen family name, once synonymous with success and philanthropy, became associated with scandal and corruption. Jennifer flew home immediately. She found James locked in his room, refusing to eat or speak to anyone. Grace stood outside his door, worried. How long has he been like this? Jennifer asked. 2 days. He won't let me in. Jennifer knocked firmly. James, it's me. Open the door or I'm getting a key. After a long moment, they heard the lock click. Jennifer entered, gesturing for Grace to follow. James looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, hunched in his wheelchair like a broken thing. "You shouldn't have come," he said to Jennifer. "This circus doesn't need more witnesses." "You're my brother." "Of course I came." Jennifer pulled up a chair. "Talk to me. What's there to say? Our parents are criminals. They were going to hurt an innocent person to save me. Everything I thought I knew about them, about this family, was a lie." "They made terrible choices," Jennifer agreed. "But they made those choices out of desperation and love for you." "That's not love," James said harshly. "Love doesn't justify violence." Grace spoke quietly from the doorway. "Your mother was right about one thing. You are dying. Dr. Morrison confirmed your kidney function is critical. Without a transplant." "Then I die," James interrupted. "That's better than living with blood on my hands." "That's giving up," Grace said firmly. "That's letting what they did destroy you too. They made their choice, James. Now you have to make yours. Do you want to live, or do you want to punish yourself for their sins?" James looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the arrest. "How can you even stand to be in the same room with me? My family tried to hurt you. They tried to hurt me. Not you. You saved me, James. You and Sarah exposed the truth when you could have looked the other way." "Grace is right," Jennifer added. "You're not responsible for what Mom and Dad did. But you are responsible for what you do next. Get on the transplant list. Fight for your life. That's how you honor the sacrifice Grace was willing to make. By living fully, by making your life worth the fight." "I was never willing," Grace pointed out. "But I am now." James's head snapped up. "What?" "I'll give you my kidney. Voluntarily, legally, with full medical supervision and consent. It's my choice." "Grace, no. It's already my choice, James. Your parents tried to take that from me. But I'm taking it back. I choose to help you if I'm a match." Jennifer looked between them. "Grace, that's incredibly generous, but you need to understand the risks." "I understand. I've researched it. I can live a perfectly normal life with one kidney. And I can save someone I care about." Grace met James's eyes. "Someone I've come to care about a lot." The compatibility tests confirmed what Grace had suspected. She was a nearly perfect match for James. Dr. Morrison, now cooperating fully with authorities to avoid prosecution as an accessory, explained that indigenous populations and certain East Asian populations sometimes showed remarkable HLA compatibility despite no genetic relationship. "It's rare but not impossible," he said. "Miss Running Bear, you would be an ideal donor." James insisted on speaking with Grace alone before any decisions were finalized. They sat in the garden, away from the chaos of the house. "I can't let you do this," James said for the 10th time. "It's not your decision. It's mine. Grace, you're doing this out of guilt or obligation or—" "I'm doing it because I want to," Grace interrupted. "Because in the past few months, you've become important to me. Because I believe you have things left to do in this world, and I want to help you do them." James was quiet for a long moment. "If you do this, I can never repay you. There's no amount of money, no gesture that could equal what you're offering." "Then don't try to repay me. Just live, James. Live fully. That's all I want." "Why?" James's voice cracked. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Grace took a deep breath. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just a job. You became my friend. And maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe something more than that." James reached for her hand. "Grace, You don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I'm not expecting anything in return. I just wanted you to know the truth." "The truth is," James said quietly, "that you're the bravest, most selfless person I've ever met. The truth is that somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my caregiver and started seeing you as someone I couldn't imagine my life without. The truth is that I think I'm falling in love with you, And that terrifies me because I have nothing to offer you but a broken body and a scandal-ridden family name. You're not broken, Grace said fiercely. You're healing. And I don't care about your family name. I care about you. They sat in silence, hands clasped, both knowing that whatever happened next, everything had changed between them. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The media frenzy continued. Grace became the heroic Indigenous woman who saved her employer's life. She hated the attention but tolerated it. Jennifer hired a PR firm to manage the family's image and a legal team to help Grace's family protect themselves from exploitation. The night before the surgery, Grace video called her family. Her mother was crying. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart? You don't owe these people anything after what they tried to do." "I'm not doing it for them, Mom. I'm doing it for James. He's special." Her father, recovering well from his own injuries, spoke up. "Grace, Mr. Chen's lawyer contacted us. They've paid off the mortgage on our house and set up education funds for your siblings. They're trying to buy your forgiveness." "It's not about forgiveness," Grace said. "It's about doing the right thing." After the call ended, Sarah came to Grace's room. "I wanted to give you this," she said, handing Grace a small leather journal. "It's James's. He's been writing in it every day since everything happened. He wanted you to read it before tomorrow." Grace opened the journal. James's handwriting filled the pages. His thoughts, his fears, his journey from bitterness to hope. The later entries were all about Grace. About how her quiet strength had taught him to fight again. About how her compassion had shown him that life was worth living. About how she'd given him something more valuable than a kidney. She'd given him a reason to want to survive. The final entry, dated that evening, read, "Tomorrow Grace is giving me the gift of life. I don't know how to thank her, how to show her what she means to me. All I know is that if I survive this surgery, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her sacrifice. I love her. I didn't think I was capable of loving anyone after the accident, but Grace has taught me that healing isn't just physical. It's emotional, spiritual. She's healed parts of me I didn't know were broken. Tomorrow, I get to live. And if I'm lucky enough, I get to live with her." Grace closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. The surgery lasted 8 hours. Jennifer and Sarah waited in the hospital room while James was in the ICU. When Grace woke from anesthesia, the first thing she saw was James's face on the video call Jennifer held up. "You're okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The doctors say you're going to be okay." "So are you," Jennifer added. "Your body accepted the kidney. James, you're going to live." Grace smiled, groggy but content. "Good. That's good." Recovery was long and difficult. Grace spent 2 weeks in the hospital, then another month at the Chen mansion under strict medical supervision. James, who recovered faster than expected, spent every possible moment with her. They watched movies, played board games, and talked about everything and nothing. 6 months after the surgery, Grace stood in her graduation gown at the University of Toronto. Jennifer had pulled strings to get her admitted mid-year, and Grace had thrown herself into studying social work. James, now walking with the aid of a cane but growing stronger every day, sat in the audience beaming with pride. After the ceremony, James wheeled up to her. He still used the wheelchair when he was tired. "Congratulations, Grace Running Bear, university graduate." "It doesn't feel real," Grace admitted. "A year ago, I was terrified to leave the reserve. Now I'm planning to get my master's degree." "You've earned it." James handed her a small box. "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a delicate silver necklace with 2 pendants, a kidney-shaped charm and a heart. Grace laughed through sudden tears. "It's perfect. Grace, this past year has been the hardest of my life, but also the best. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me your kidney, yes, but more than that, you gave me hope. You showed me that life is worth fighting for." "You did the same for me," Grace said. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. James took her hand. I love you. I think I've loved you since that day you refused to quit, even when I gave you every reason to. I know I'm not the same man I was before the accident. I can't ski black diamond runs or climb mountains anymore. You're better than that man, Grace interrupted. You're kinder, more thoughtful, more real. And I love you exactly as you are. James kissed her then, in front of the crowd of graduating students and proud families. And Grace knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Chen parents pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and received suspended sentences with heavy fines and community service. The scandal destroyed Chen Industries' reputation, but Mr. Chen used his remaining resources to establish a foundation for ethical organ donation awareness. It was his way of seeking redemption. Grace's family thrived. Her father got a job as a safety consultant at the mill, using his experience to prevent accidents. Sarah was accepted to veterinary school with a full scholarship. Marcus and Tommy were excelling in school, their futures bright with possibility. 2 years later, Grace and James stood on the same land where Grace's grandmother was buried. They'd invited both families, the Running Bears from the reserve and the Chen family from Toronto, to witness their wedding according to traditional Indigenous ceremony. Jennifer served as Grace's maid of honor. Sarah, now James's best friend as well as his sister, stood beside him. Mr. and Mrs. Chen sat in the audience, their faces reflecting the weight of past mistakes and the hope of future redemption. The elder conducting the ceremony spoke about healing, about how sometimes the greatest gifts come from the deepest pain, about how love can transform tragedy into triumph. As Grace and James exchanged vows, surrounded by two families who had learned hard lessons about sacrifice, consent, and the true meaning of love, Grace thought about the scared girl who'd arrived in Toronto 2 years ago. That girl had been looking for a way to save her family. Instead, she'd saved a man's life and found her own purpose in the process. And James, who had thought his life was over when he could no longer walk, had discovered that true strength wasn't about physical ability. It was about facing each day with courage, about accepting help with grace, about loving someone enough to let them make their own choices, even when those choices involved tremendous risk. They kissed as husband and wife, and two families who had been strangers became one. Sometimes healing takes time. Sometimes it requires sacrifice. Sometimes it demands that we face uncomfortable truths about the people we love. But always, it requires hope. And in the end, hope was what saved them all. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If you loved this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear a message of hope today. Comment below and tell us, what moment touched your heart the most? And don't forget to check out our other amazing stories by clicking the videos on your screen right now. Until next time, remember, even in our darkest moments, hope can light the way forward.